Today I'm sharing 5 tips about gouache painting that I wish I had known earlier. Even in this peaceful lakeside landscape, you can see how I apply these tips. Let's get right into tip number 1. It's better to do your sketch with a watercolor pencil rather than a regular pencil. The lines made with watercolor pencils dissolve easily with water and disappear completely. This is especially helpful when you're working with thin layers of paint. Graphite from a regular pencil tends to smudge and can make your colors look muddy. I mixed white and cyan with a bit of water and used a flat brush to paint a horizontal S-shaped strokes. This is a simple way to create the look of a water surface. And that brings us to tip number 2. Before adding any details, start by loosely blocking in all areas with their base color. This helps you better judge your composition and instantly see if proportions, shapes and perspective work. It also gives you an idea of whether the mood and harmony you want to create is coming through and whether there's enough contrast. If something doesn't feel right at this stage, it's much easier to fix broad areas than refined details. Plus, working this way is more efficient because you're not reworking things you have already put a lot of time into. The water on the horizon turned out a bit too dark for me. However, gouache is opaque, so I can lighten the area a bit with white. Next, I will paint some hills in the background using a slightly darker shade of blue. I usually work from back to front, but today I started with the water surface. That's always my favorite thing to paint. Later I will even paint the sky. Using a small filbert brush, I mix sap green and cyan to paint a wooden hill in the background. Greens in the distance always have a bluish undertone and are usually a bit paler. You don't need to paint every single tree. Rotate the filbert brush so that you can draw small vertical strokes with the narrow side. And if you vary the shade of the green a bit, it will look like a forest in no time. I paint a slightly lighter layer of the green tone over the forest, as it was still a bit too dark for me. I mix a slightly more yellowish green for the trees in the middle ground, By applying it in depth, I avoid overly flat tones. I realized I forgot to paint the sky. I now moisten the entire sky area with water and apply a thin layer of cyan. Gouache paints are also excellent for thin layers of paint that create a watercolor effect. I am little careful to not get too much water on the already painted areas, otherwise the paint might dissolve. Now I'll mix a darker shade and add it to the trees in the front as a shadow color. You can see that I only added a little blue to the green. This brings us directly to tip number 3. Keep your color palette simple. This means limiting yourself to a few colors that work well together. This makes blending easier, brings calm to the image, and helps you focus better on contrast and composition. To make the shadow color even darker, I mixed some burnt sienna into the blue-green. Now I paint the trees on the left side using similar shades of green. I paint the shoreline in front of the trees with small horizontal strokes. I also mix a little titanium white into the light green to help cover the water lines. Now I'll start painting a shade of green on the right side and in the foreground to first fill the white areas. The application is watery and brings us to tip number 4. Work from thin to thick. Working this way has many advantages. Layers adhere better. Thin, transparent base layers dry quickly and provide a stable foundation to which opaque, thicker paints adhere well. Color web is created. Transparent layers allow underlying colors to show through, creating more luminosity and depth. Avoiding smearing. Applying thick paint over thin layers prevents the lower layers from dissolving or running. Mistakes are easier to correct. Thin layers are easier to adjust or rework before applying too much material. I make the front edge of the shore a little darker. Here, too, I paint with short horizontal strokes. This darker edge creates more three-dimensionality. The front edge of the meadow also receives a darker border to the water. I'm going to paint out some blades of grass in the front section. You don't have to paint every single blade. It's enough to give them a rough structure. I add more yellow to the meadow. which gives the whole picture a spring-like feel. Adding a few dark green blades of grass in the foreground makes the meadow more three-dimensional, because in the front part of the meadow we can see a bit into the grass and, of course, also see the shadows. I apply the same procedure to the front meadow that I used for the middle meadow. I add a few darker blades of grass to give the meadow some depth. The meadow in the front will receive more details. For this, I switched to a script liner brush and paint individual grasses here and there with a dark green. At this point, I realized that the water needed some more shading. Before I continue painting the grass, I mix some dark blue and add shadows to the water with a flat brush in horizontal strokes. The shadows in the water are now complete, and I can paint the remaining blades of grass. To make the colors of the flowers pop, I paint white dots with titanium white as a base layer. And while I'm doing that, let's move on to tip number 5, smooth watercolor paper. Instead of using rough paper like I do with watercolors, I prefer smooth paper for gouache. This helps me apply the colors more evenly and create much finer lines and sharper contours. Rough paper would fray, which may often be a desired effect with watercolors, as I tend to use a looser brush stroke and watercolors flow better. But with gouache I prefer crisp contours. Over the dried white, I now paint various shades of orange, which I mix from lemon yellow and natural sienna. I also leave some of the flowers white. Using magenta and a bit of white, I mix a pink shade and paint some pink flowers. I think my flowers still look too tidy. I cover the top of my painting with a piece of tracing paper and spray various colors from my palette onto my flower meadow. I dilute the colors to a milky consistency. The best part is always removing the tape. If you liked my video, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Bye, until next time.